In a small town in ancient Israel, there lived a widow whose life had suddenly fallen apart. Her husband had been a faithful servant of God, a devoted follower of the prophet Elisha. He loved the Lord and lived righteously, but one day, he died unexpectedly. And when he died, he left behind more than grief. He left behind debt. In those days, debt was not just a financial problem, it was a life-threatening crisis. If a person could not repay what they owed, creditors were allowed to take their children as slaves until the debt was paid. This widow now faced every mother's worst nightmare. Her 2 sons were about to be taken away. Imagine the fear. Imagine the helplessness. Imagine watching everything collapse at once. She had no husband, no income, no protection, no solution, but she still had faith. Instead of surrendering to fear, she ran to the man of God, Elisha. With tears in her eyes and desperation in her voice, she cried, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he feared the Lord. But now the creditor is coming to take my 2 sons as slaves." Elisha listened carefully. He did not ignore her pain, and he did not dismiss her situation. But instead of immediately performing a miracle, he asked her a surprising question. "What do you have in your house?" At first, the question may have sounded strange. She was expecting help, not a question. She was expecting a solution, not an inventory. The widow looked around her home, if it could even be called a home. There were no valuables, no savings, no expensive items. Then she answered, "Your servant has nothing there at all, except a small jar of oil. Just a small jar. Not barrels, not containers, not storage tanks, just a little oil." To her, it seemed insignificant, too small to matter, too little to solve anything. But God often begins miracles with what people consider useless. Elisha then gave her a strange instruction. "Go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few." This was unusual. Why empty jars? Why many? And why borrow them? But here is where faith begins to move. Faith does not always understand, but faith obeys. The widow did exactly what Elisha said. She went from house to house, knocking on doors, explaining her need, collecting empty jars. Some neighbors may have been confused. Some may have been curious. Some may have wondered what she was planning. But she kept gathering jars. Small jars, large jars, wide jars, tall jars. Soon, her house was filled with empty vessels. Then Elisha gave the final instruction. "Go inside, shut the door behind you and your sons, and pour oil into all the jars. As each is filled, set it aside." This moment required deep trust. There was no audience, no public display, no dramatic crowd, just a mother, her sons, and a small jar of oil. She shut the door. Silence filled the room. Her sons began bringing the empty jars one after another. She lifted the small jar of oil and started pouring. One jar filled, then another, then another. But something unusual was happening. The oil was not finishing. It kept flowing. The same small jar kept producing more oil. Her eyes widened. Her sons stared in amazement. Jar after jar after jar filled completely. The room began to transform. What was once empty was now overflowing. The miracle continued until there were no more empty vessels left. Then one of her sons said, "There is not another jar." And at that moment, the oil stopped. Not because God ran out of power, but because there was no more room for the miracle. The size of her miracle was connected to the number of vessels she prepared. The widow rushed back to Elisha and told him everything that had happened. And Elisha gave her the final instruction. "Go, sell the oil and pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what is left." In one day, everything changed. Debt was canceled. Her sons were saved. Her future was restored. And it all started with one question. What do you have in your house? Spiritual lessons from the story. God often begins with what you already have. The widow thought her oil was nothing, but in God's hands, it became everything. Obedience unlocks miracles. She did not argue. She acted. Faith prepares before results appear. She gathered empty jars before seeing any oil multiply. Private obedience produces public testimonies. The miracle happened behind closed doors, but the testimony spread everywhere. God's provision does not only solve problems, it secures the future. Powerful reflection: many people are praying for big miracles while ignoring the small things God has already placed in their hands. The gift, the talent, the opportunity, the idea. What looks small today may be the very seed of tomorrow's overflow. God is still asking, what do you have in your house? Because when faith meets obedience, the little becomes more than enough. Like and subscribe for more Bible stories like this.